Most entitled people get away with their bad behavior because they think that no one is going to say anything about it. But that's not the case in this video. We've got real life stories of public callouts that left rude Karens shocked beyond belief, including one unforgettable one about a lady who thought she could push around a little kid and learn the hard way that siblings stick together at all costs. I worked as a nanny and frequently took the baby to the park, where she did the normal make friends and play routine. There was a mom I frequently saw whose youngest child we would play with. One morning we were playing, and when I looked up, I noticed that I was alone with 2 toddlers and her older preschool-aged child. I called for her and looked around for 15 minutes before calling the cops. 20 minutes later, I still didn't see her, but the cops and a social worker arrived. They took my statement, then left with the abandoned children. As I was walking down the street, about a block from the park, the mom came running up to me and pointed to the park. She asked where her kids were. I told her what happened, and an argument ensued. She was enraged that I didn't just sit and wait at the park with her kids while she ran to the store because I was a nanny. Apparently, I should be able to handle extra kids. I proceeded to tell her, as much as I could with the baby present, what kind of mother she was and how much she endangered her children. I also gave her a general earful about being an irresponsible, expectant idiot. There was some kind of court hearing after that, where she claimed I was babysitting her kids. However, when she couldn't provide the judge with my name or contact information, I was in the clear. I don't know exactly what happened to her in the end, but I could tell the judge was absolutely furious with her. And we're off to a wild start. Can you believe the rich person audacity it takes to think that just because someone is a nanny, that they're your nanny too? Without even asking them, let alone paying for it. I can only imagine the looks on the cops' faces when they realized the crazy stunt this lady was trying to pull. A table of 8 came in on a Saturday. 2 women and 6 kids under 10 years old. The kids ran wild, to the point where they actually ran to the other tables and stuck their hands into other people's food. The moms did nothing. I asked them nicely to control their children and got yelled at for even suggesting it. So I went to the general manager, and in the time it took me to find him, the kids had crawled up onto the bar's wall of liquor and pushed every single bottle they could get their hands on onto the floor. Everything broke. The manager went nuclear. He couldn't get the women to pay for what their kids had done, so he had not only banned them for life, he also had their pictures circulated to every other store in the chain. If you worked in a restaurant and you saw 6 kids and 2 women walk in, what would your strategy be? Hide? Make sure they get seated in your enemy section? Quit on the spot? A combination of all 3? Like, how clueless do you have to be to not only let your gaggle of kids touch other people's food, but also destroy property? A lifetime, chain-wide ban is honestly the minimum punishment here. My buddy and I were at a movie, and these dudes were talking about how they had just gotten out of basic training. They then proceeded to bash the movie, making rude comments out loud and ruining everyone else's experience. My buddy told them, "Pipe down!" They flipped him off, but obliged. After the movie, we were at the front of the pack, right behind the 6 or 7 guys who were being rude. My buddy said, "That was really rude, how you were behaving." And one of them, the loudest guy, whipped out his ID and said, "Yeah, well, I'm a Marine, and I fight for your freedoms." Well, my buddy just so happened to be an officer, so he whipped out his ID and said, "I'm a Marine officer, and just because you have the honor of wearing a uniform doesn't give you the right to be a jerk." Then he made them stand at attention right at the door of the movie theater and apologized to every patron exiting. What are the odds that these guys would choose to mouth off to a guy who just so happens to be their superior? Also, why did they think they were important enough to talk throughout a movie in the first place? Anyway, I'd say that's perfect karmic justice. 10 out of 10, no notes. I used to work in the toy department of a retail store. The Leapfrog laptop had just come out and they were really expensive. I was straightening the shelves and I noticed a kid just wailing away on one of these laptops. The mom was nowhere to be found. I approached the kid and asked him nicely, "Is that how you play with your toys at home?" The kid gave me a sheepish no and placed it back on the shelf. I was feeling pretty good about myself until the kid's mother came out of nowhere. She very rudely told me that I had no right to speak to her child that way. I calmly looked his mother in the eye and said, "Ma'am, your son was about to break a $150 toy. Our store has a you break it, you buy it policy." I continued, If you would like me to give it back to him so we can continue hitting it, I'd be happy to ring you up on my register for the damages." She then gave me a dirty look, grabbed her son, and walked off. It's always the moms with the brattiest kids who go to bat defending their bad behavior. I bet she wouldn't have had so much bluster if she actually ended up having to pay $150 for a broken laptop. Would you step in and say something if you were in the same situation? I'm a pretty mellow guy who travels for a living, and I don't really let small things get to me. However, a couple of years ago, I was on a flight that was running 30 minutes late. I was already thinking to myself that the connection was going to be tight, and it would most likely require me to run or briskly walk for a mile or so through the airport. I was one of the last passengers to board the plane, and I had to check my bag since there was no more room. The 4 or 5 people behind me did the same thing. I worked my way down the aisle, and there was a guy asking people to shift their bags. He was trying to get his oversized bag to fit, and there was no room. He called for the flight attendant, who walked up and said, "Sir, we're out of room. You will have to check your bag." That was it for him. He went off on her and started yelling, "This airline sucks. I'm a million-mile member. I want your employee number and name," and so on. At that point, I pretty much mentally snapped. I felt horrible for the flight attendant who was just doing her job, and this guy had spent 5 minutes making an idiot out of himself and burning up time. People were gawking, cringing, and just hoping he would stop so they could move on. I just yelled, "Shut up. Shut the heck up." I was shaking with anger. Then I went off. I said, "Take your bag to the front of the plane, check it in, and stop with this insanity. You are what is wrong with air travel. Your sense of entitlement makes me want to puke. If you are a million-mile flyer, you know the rules of flying. You should know how this works." I continued, saying, "Why punish everyone on this flight? You have insulted this lovely young lady. You have made everyone on this plane uncomfortable with your little show, and I'm now another 5 minutes late for my connection. I want you and your little Napoleon complex issues to shut up and sit down. Do we have a problem?" He started sputtering and looking all flustered but didn't say a single word. Somebody at the back of the plane started clapping. Soon, the whole plane was applauding me. I just sat down and waited while everyone clapped, and this guy took a long walk of shame to the front of the plane. The flight attendant thanked me, and so did everyone else. I didn't mean to do it, but I just can't stand people like that. The best part was I had free drinks for the flight. The attendant gave me a stack of free drink cards for my next couple of flights, and one of the passengers gave me a voucher for free Wi-Fi that he had won. It was very satisfying. Correct me if I'm being hard-headed here, but if you're really that worried about your carry-on fitting in the overhead on a flight, you better make sure you're one of the first ones on in your boarding group. Otherwise, you have no right to throw a fit. At least there was someone there to put this entitled jerk in his place. If I'd been on the plane, I definitely would have been the person starting the slow clap. I had worked at Chili's for about 5 years. I had so many experiences with rude people that I lost count, but one was by far the worst. I was waiting tables around graduation time, and I had a party of 25 call ahead at about 7 p.m., saying they would be arriving in 30 minutes. We set up the table for them, and were anticipating their arrival. They actually showed up about an hour and a half later than they said they would. We had since broken up the big table and seated other smaller parties there. When they arrived, they were angry that their table wasn't ready for them. The really soft-spoken, sweet hostess who was working that night simply explained to them that we thought they had chosen somewhere else to go since they hadn't come sooner. The lady who was speaking to the hostess immediately burst out, saying that we should have known that they were still coming. She then said out loud that she knew Chili's was a terrible idea and that we were all terrible at our jobs. Almost in tears, the hostess said that we would set up another table for them in a closed section and that I would take care of them. These same people would always come in, be rude to everyone, never tip, and constantly complain so they could get free food. When I waited on large parties by myself, I always started everyone with water, just because it takes some time to get everyone's drink order and get it out to them. I figured it was better to at least have some water available while waiting. As soon as we got them settled in, several started complaining that they didn't have water and that I was rude not to offer them a different option. I simply explained I would be bringing them whatever they would like and that the water was just to hold them for the time being. Apparently, that wasn't good enough for them. They told me I was an idiot and said, "Get this mess out of my face," referring to the water. Most of them ordered strawberry lemonade, so I made all of the drinks and brought them out to them. The group then started to complain, "This stuff tastes nasty." They told me it didn't taste anything like what it did last time. I told them that we made it by the same measurements every time, but that I would be glad to make a new batch for them. I went and poured out what we had and made another batch of strawberry lemonade. I took it out to them, and they again complained that it was nasty. I offered to get them something else, and they said, "We just want a waiter that isn't an idiot and knows how to make strawberry lemonade." I got the manager to explain that we made our strawberry lemonade the same way every time. They rolled their eyes and told the manager that I was being rude to them. Then, when they started eating their meals, they began to be even more disrespectful to me. They started pouring their drinks out on the floor on purpose, throwing food at me, and insulting me right in front of my face. I had a couple of other tables complain that this large party was being extremely loud, which they were. I went over and asked if they minded being a little quieter, as they were disturbing the other tables in the restaurant. One kid then yelled, "Oh, you think I'm too loud?" They all started being even louder than before, and some tables even got up and left. That was the final straw. I yelled over them and told them they were no longer welcome at our restaurant. That shut them up. One kid told me that I couldn't do that, and I said, "When you start causing other paying customers to leave, I can do what I want. Now get out." They had the nerve to ask for boxes of their food that they hadn't touched because they were too busy being loud. I told them that I couldn't care less if they wanted their food and that they needed to leave. My manager and I stood at the door smiling, watching them all walk out. One girl told me that I'd ruined her graduation party. I informed her that she had no class and got what she deserved. A few of them stayed and talked to my manager, begging him to allow them back because it was their favorite place to eat. He told them they were never welcome back. Not only did this Chili's server get to stand up to a table of Karens, but they also had their manager on their side for it. Now that's a rare moment. I gotta give them kudos for standing up to this table for wreaking so much havoc. Seriously, what kind of people throw food at a server? They deserved worse than a lifetime ban. I was at a 7-Eleven making a purchase when some yuppie lady interrupted my transaction. She angrily told the cashier that her coffee wasn't hot. He apologized and told her that he could make another pot right away. She said, "No, I'm way too busy to wait for that." The clerk offered her a refund and she responded, "No, I don't want a refund. I'm busy and I want a hot cup of coffee right now." I felt so bad for this clerk, who was clearly new to the country and was shocked by her rudeness. I just snapped right then and there. I said, "Listen, you stupid yuppie." He apologized that the coffee wasn't hot and offered to make you another pot or a refund. What the heck do you expect him to do? The only way for him to comply with your request is to get a time machine and brew another pot before you get here. I continued, saying, "Does he look like some sort of time-traveling wizard to you? You need to just shut up, get back into your ridiculous SUV, and try to act like an adult." She just stood there, shaking. I couldn't tell if it was rage or fear, but after what seemed like an eternity, she ran out of the store and took off. All the people in line clapped for me. The clerk was also shocked at my outburst, but told me, "It's good to know that some people stand up for strangers in this country." See, I think the defining feature of a Karen might be their complete inability to grasp the reality of the situation they're mad about. Like, what could this woman possibly have expected the clerk to do if refunding her or brewing another pot of coffee weren't good enough options for her? At least we got an absolutely epic rant out of it. My wife and I were waiting for a flight home from Vegas. It was around 3 p.m. and our flight was overbooked. We were hanging out at the bar right next to our gate, still getting our drinks while we waited. We then began to hear this horrendously loud argument happening at the counter. It turns out this couple, both in their mid-50s, were throwing a raging tantrum over not sitting together. They had booked their flights on Expedia together, but the airline had moved their seats because the flight was so full. They were offered the next flight, but they continued to scream and moan. This went on for about 5 minutes. You could see this poor 18-year-old girl behind the counter was just starting to break down. She needed help immediately. Out of nowhere, my wife proceeded to get up and walk over to the counter. I had no idea what she had planned. She just said straight to the poor girl, ignoring the couple, "They can have my seat and my husband's seat together if they promise to shut up and leave you alone. We'll wait for the next flight." The couple was shocked. They just stared at her and started giving her the stink eye, but they stayed silent. We then proceeded to exchange our tickets and got our seats for the next flight. However, the flight was overbooked, so we received vouchers for 2 free round-trip tickets to anywhere the airline flew because we'd volunteered our seats on an overbooked flight. We ended up using them for flights to go to Hawaii later that year, and the next flight was only 30 minutes later. Karens tend to think that everyone is on their side and not everyone would agree with them if they were in the same situation, so there's no better way to humiliate them than to take the side of the person they're persecuting. I think this guy's wife is a total hero for what she did. I was an orderly at a nursing home and I was told not to shave a male resident because there wasn't enough time. The resident was upset as he was a very neat older gentleman. The state paid an unannounced visit and gave a negative mark for this man having stubble. The nurse who told me not to shave him pointed out to the state inspector and said, "This guy is new, he was supposed to do it, but didn't." I grabbed a can of shaving cream and told him I would do it right that minute. I couldn't handle the charged nurse lying to my face, so I sprayed her from her chin to her hair with shaving cream, told the state inspector the truth, and quit on the spot. This might be my favorite story of revenge of all time. It makes me so mad to hear about people who mistreat the elderly, so this was truly satisfying. I only wish the employee would have stayed and that the nurse would have been fired. Now that would have been a perfect ending. Once in the 5th grade, a lady grabbed my younger brother by the neck. She was mad at him because, according to her, he nudged her child out of the way when he cut in front of him at the water fountain. When she touched him, I saw red. She was about to get what was coming to her. I was calling her every name I could think of while following her out the door. I wasn't using your standard 5th grade insults. My dad was a Marine, and I was saying all the stuff I wasn't supposed to have heard from him that I'd amassed over the years. I followed her and her kid out the front door and got to the circle where buses pulled in to pick up their kids. Then she turned around and came at me like she was trying to destroy me. There were no teachers around. They were all inside, trying to find out what was going on. It was just her and me, and I could see in her eyes that she was really going to hurt me. She grabbed me by the shoulders, picked me up, and shook me as hard as she could. The whole time I was screaming. Then I heard car brakes, and my mom tackled her. That night, I got ice cream for trying to protect my brother, and was sent to bed early for saying bad words to a stranger. I would never dream about speaking to a kid I don't know, let alone pushing them around. I hope this Karen really learned her lesson about messing with little kids after getting tag teamed by a mom and a 5th grader. Incredible. That's the last Karen who's getting shut down today, but check out the rest of our channel for more jaw-dropping stories from real life. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like rating, subscribe for more, comment below, and we'll be back with a brand new video very soon.